Good afternoon. It's Joyful Hermit, and I just had a day of too much pain yet again. I'm not doing well with the new medication regimen, and also my headache is worse, my neck's worse, so I just finally took another BC, one of these over the counter little ground aspirin and caffeine. It's very strong stuff. I highly recommend it if you have just a constant headache that requires something like that. Um, Amazingly, the pain meds have never worked for my spinal headaches. And it wasn't until 2000 or 2001, maybe it was no, it would have been 2004 when I found out about how this BC stuff. And if you can get super strength Excedrin, not the migraine, but just the ones without the acetaminophen, and grind it up or chew them with hot water, it really works well. But Costco doesn't sell them, so I found BC on Amazon. Just a little shout out to BC. It used to come in like a little packet, like a Band-Aid wrapper, that waxed wrapper with no print on it. And I would take it, and oh my gosh, people, this was years ago, thought that I was taking like cocaine or something because it's powdered like that. So I'm glad they've changed. I stopped. I got Excedrin and just chewed one or something or ground it myself. But no, they've changed the packaging now. So the little packets say what it is. So uh, you won't get arrested or odds. At the time, there wasn't so much of a situation about drugs back then. So opioids and stuff. So, and they are terrible. I'm not condoning people who don't need them taking them, and I'm sorry that I have to, because it's just another suffering that I go through with people. You wouldn't believe, it's like being Catholic, what people believe if you have to take pain pills, and if you have to take them consistently. It's a real blight on you, and they actually will cut you off and not want to have anything to do with you, and also preach and assume that you can't think clearly. Well, I can't when my pain's too high. That's my problem, is the pain. But no, I have other problems. I will say that I get disgusted with myself, and I'm in one of those modes where I'm doing more an examination of conscience. And that's what St. Ignatius's 30-day exercises will teach you to do, is to do an examination of conscience every night. And I did that 30 days. I think I lasted to maybe day 22. And my spiritual father at the time, the old spiritual Da, he made me stop because I took it all very seriously, and it got very intense. And it was heavy duty stuff, and very really dug into you. And if you at all are conscientious yourself, which I'm a very conscientious person and want to do the right thing and stuff. Of course, I always mess up, but you can really get down on yourself a lot. And the examination of conscience, I mean, someone who researches and delves into stuff like I do, you can really start tearing yourself apart, and there's not much left when you're done. And that it's good to know our faults. That's basically what an examination of conscience does. And you're supposed to do it at the end of the day. You go back through your day and have a look-see at what you said, how you behaved, what you did. And it's still a very good practice to get into, just as long as you aren't a scrupulous type. And I never got into scruples. Like that's can be like if you go to confession and you get into all kinds of little things like I I didn't immediately get up when Lovey needed to go out to go to the bathroom, something like that. And that's a sin. You think that that's a sin, or everything starts to become a sin to you then. And you really can become very self absorbed. It can be prideful, even a sort of an egoistic or narcissistic personality disorder of not that you're great, but just how bad you are. So, got to watch these things. There's always something, especially in the spiritual life. So, but it's a good idea to have an awareness of ourselves. And I just, maybe it's because I looked at the lady who attacks me, and has for 17 years and got vicious. One time left a big long comment. That was the first big thing that I knew. That was back in 2007, just tearing me apart. And people who read my blog at the time saw that. And she even said that she couldn't stand me so much she just wanted to shake me. And or she didn't want me writing and still doesn't. And I stopped, but I might take it up again. I don't know. It depends on how I do with the videos, because I did notice on her site when I had looked up something online, and then up came her site with some stuff about me. And it was stuff that I hadn't read before, and it's nasty. And still doxing me, or and hadn't taken it down. I thought she had taken her stuff down that could get her into legal trouble, but she hadn't. But I noticed it's just all this criticism, attacking people, attacking this and that, and then promoting herself and making up these things that that hermits are supposed to do. Canon law hermits are. The rest of us are sort of not. We're nons. And not legal. And if you're like me, you'll be called a fraud. So if you get in her way, or if you take away, I think, from her position that she has established for herself. But I noticed it's just so much of that and not much spiritual. But then I thought about what I talk about and how critical I get. I mean to be discerning. And of course I could say, well, I was just discerning this or that, or discerning the talk on the soul ties. But no, discerning is just one little thread, one little thin thread away. There you can see that thread. Away from criticizing. And then it can move into detraction of my own. So I wished I hadn't mentioned the talk that I started to listen to, but I didn't follow through. Instead, I just looked up what soul ties and saw it, and started out as a New Age thing. But it has merit. It's better than nothing. It's good to break our attachments. They just have called them soul ties now. The New Age people did. And then this priest, who's an excellent priest and very well intentioned. And I think he was all excited about this and wanted people to know how to break these soul ties. But spent a lot of time explaining how it isn't just New Age, that it's Christian too. And yet, but he didn't realize that John of the Cross covered it and then some and a lot more. Or that Jesus gives that how to get out of soul ties by loving God above all else. But that's hard to do in our life, and I've been thinking about it today. And I've been asking Jesus to really help get me focused because I'm not doing well. I'm not, um, I'm just in so much pain. I can't really empty my mind to be still. And you shouldn't really just empty your mind. You don't really do that. You always want God in there. But to still myself, still, or to do even a contemplative prayer that I do, such as I can get into that contemplative prayer if I'm gardening. But I haven't felt well enough to do much gardening or manual labor anymore. So, but just to quiet myself, to have contemplative prayer. I can't because I have to have something going on in my mind, or my fingers tapping the keys with my mind flowing thoughts in, or watching something, or researching where my mind is researching, or taking the dogs to the dog park. And woe to the person, it's at the end of the day when my pain is even higher, who asks me anything. I can be like a broken record, because talking, that thinking, and the mouth going, those kinds of activities, it has to be something that is body and mind to get me away from my pain. My pain has become encompassing. And maybe it's even an attachment. I'm not attached to it, but it has attached to me. It rules me. It's my day, my temporal life is ruled by it. My soul is not ruled by the pain, but my spiritual life has been altered because of it. I wouldn't begin to go and sit, and most churches now have padded seats, Protestant and Catholic. And you can, at least with the Catholics, they have daily mass and several weekend masses, so people potentially sit longer on their bums. But otherwise, it's sort of sad that we can't sit on a wood pew. And I think that way because wood is what I can sit on longer. And since I have my pump, definitely I can. I can sit on wood longer. But it took being in the ecstasy. I wouldn't feel any pain when I was in the ecstasy. So the padded seat was okay, but even then, if I could move the padded, I would flip the pad up and over and sit on the wood, because it's the next day. If I sit on padding or sit at all now, the pain will shoot up. And the pump helps it somewhat, but so I can sit and be conversant and stuff. Now with the pump helping with the lower body pain, the pump that has a tube that goes right into my spinal cord dural space, and you use 1/300th of the medication if it goes directly into your cord area, because then it's just affecting the nerves that are going down my legs, because they can't put the pump in up high. The tube goes around, it's right in my abdomen, and it goes, that's why I wear suspenders, keep my pants sort of opened up a little bit because it's too tight on that. It's a big hockey puck thing, and it was surgically implanted in my abdomen. And then the tube goes around, and they feed it around under your skin and then stick it in your spinal cord area, the dural space. They don't hit the cord, but they go into the space around it, so that the medication basically bathes the nerves that are sending out the signals. And it does from he put mine in at the L3, L4 area, which I asked him to do it above. I said, please do it above my L4-5. Because if you go up through, because then you feed it up through a little bit. It just doesn't go straight in. They feed it up. So he went right up through my messed up clump nerves. And then that caused me all the stomach issues, the eating issues and things. So whatever. And that wasn't my neurosurgeon. That was a young neurosurgeon that they have him do the pumps, because the pump isn't as strategic as say a major spine surgery. But I mean, it's strategic, but it's not as you're in the hospital overnight. Some are let out during the day, but mine was a later surgery, so I had to spend the night. Anyway, I've been asking God to help get me focused on my purpose and on meaningful sharing. And regarding this woman, that if I'm to do something about it, he needs to make it clear to me. But lo and behold, one thing that I noticed when I went was in her recent articles that she's bashing this other person solidly. And I noticed that a publishing company had quoted her, a national newspaper had quoted her. Evidently her blog is, that's all she talks about, is this situation in Lexington, Kentucky, with a bishop who approved a hermit who in process transgendered. So I guess it's a big national thing. I knew nothing of it until a friend who has a brother-in-law who's a deacon in that diocese mentioned it to me. And, that's the world. It's the world, the church world. And so I guess it's a big hullabaloo in the country, and probably will get to be even more because it involves transgender rights and things. And but this lady doesn't like anyone getting attention other than herself. So she's been attacking this transgender hermit and the bishop, and has people like writing in as if they are writing into her, asking her opinions on things. But this national newspaper did quote her blog or something, some things that she said about the hermit and about the bishop. And she puts all this in her blog then because it's all part of her position and power and being an authority. She's made herself into an authority. And part of it is, she's a systematic theologian, she's written, and that she got her master's in theology, or intimated or something, that way back in her blog, and was a pastoral associate at her church, and had that listed. That's no longer listed in the, but she said what college it was. It's a long time ago when I would read her blog, before she even tricked me. Or no, it wasn't then. It was after she had tricked me into contacting her. Had someone else do it, get me to contact her, saying she had things she would teach me. But I got to thinking today, does she really have a master's in theology? So I just looked up this college in her area that she said she went to. I recalled then she didn't say that she graduated, but this master's, they don't even have a master's in theology. It's not one of their degrees. I just looked it up. And I thought, this could be a whole big ruse, this person. She does have a video of herself, supposedly herself, being canonically approved, and has the video, picture of the video. I thought she at one point had the whole video on, but it was distant, all distant. And you couldn't really tell because she wears a habit with a veil and has a picture that's been up for 17 years. So who knows if it's even her? She could have passed away. And this other woman that she has designated, who also attacked me. She has these other people, used to, when I had comments available. And I had to take the comments off my blog because of the hate and the harassment they were doing on it, on my comment section. So this other lady, because she said then that explained, or the lady explained, because she even wanted me to call, no, I'm not calling her, calling even her pal who wrote these. She got so angry and hateful to me, she couldn't even put a sentence together. It was hard to even understand, and it was weird. And that lady also said that she couldn't stand me and that needed me to call her so she could straighten me out. Oh dear. But and that her position is that if anything happens to this hermit lady, then she is to keep her blog going for her after she dies. So it'll be a perpetual attack vehicle. But all this made me realize, I mean, a person, maybe it's good that you see me and that I'm who I am. You don't know my name or location, and also that you see that I'm a very imperfect person. I'm struggling with spiritual focus as far as prayer life because of my pain. So I've decided, I've asked God to accept everything I write and everything I say is prayer. And whatever I do is prayer, which then will hopefully help me strive harder to speak better, speak love, do love, think love, engage in loving things. And I also have asked God to please help me that I just don't do with the temporal church. I don't do well. It's just one bad thing after another that's happened to me. I have major trust issues, especially I even this bishop here. I wrote and I just started like he wanted to know my background stuff because I wrote to let him know I was in the area. And at first also thought, well, if he only wants diocese hermits, and I better tell him that this has been what I've been. I've been a traditional hermit, privately professed and historic, of the early hermits, that type of hermit where God consecrates you and you give your vows and you live your life and you have a priest, spiritual director, because the early hermits always had, even the prophets, Samuel had Eli, Elijah mentored Elisha. They always had a director, a wiser, older hermit or priest. The desert fathers would have someone mentor them until they became to a point where they could mentor someone else or guide someone else. So anyway, I thought, wow, you could really pull fast ones on other people if you want to. And I can, if I were the type of person that wanted to delude myself, but thankfully I'm not. My parents reared us that we're conscientious, we're honest, and my mother was critical, and I appreciated that because I knew she wanted me to be good and to be the best I could be, even in my posture and everything. So how I wrote, she was an English teacher, and all her students, she would spend hours grading compositions and putting in suggestions and little arrows and where different punctuation needed to be, and even would explain, this is a clause, not a phrase. You need a comma here, and because it's a clause, and all of that. She really cared. She was conscientious and did her best no matter what she did. And that's how we were reared, and my dad was the same way. So I want to do my best. But the temporal stuff really, because so much negative has happened to me, and God did give me assignments. I have the gift of inner sight, which many of you have, and any of you can have. God can give you that gift. It comes through awareness, a spiritual awareness of matters. And mystics who are born mystics, that's part of what comes with you. You pick up nuances in situations, and you sort of see in more. And I see more in actually than I see outer. And part of that is the pain I have causes my mind over these 20, how many years? No, it'll be 40 years in August since I've had constant pain. And your mind automatically, after a while, because the pain pills don't even begin to keep it low enough. So your mind has to go elsewhere, focus elsewhere. And most temporal things aren't enough to get my mind away from the body of pain, the temporal pain of this body. So I'm elsewhere. I cannot notice things around me. It doesn't get to me. But still things of the church, because I love the church. I love the church so much that just when I found out within a month of being Catholic that this priest had this big gambling operation going. It was legalized charitable gambling, but it's terrible. And it was more than charitable gambling. Poor people were going and spending their week's earnings or their welfare money, hoping to hit it big in bingo. And little old ladies were there with their holy cards and their little statues and medals. It was sick and perverse. Having those there, thinking that Mary or Saint Joseph would help them win gambling money. No. So that upset me, and he used the money. He didn't report to the diocese didn't know he was doing this. He kept the money, and then he used it for things that made him more popular, and paid this young author who was from another country, but all the young women loved him and everything. So he would go around the country and give talks, and this old priest then gave him a lot of money for his organization, this young man's organization, so he could go along and preach and have talks and be part of the being important. And it was it was sad. It was sad, but it was not good. But he was my first assignment. But I got so into it and so upset that God took me off. He had two big angels show me literally to the door. My job was done, and they took this priest and were dealing with him. And from that point on, God let me know that I was no longer on that assignment. It had gotten way beyond what I could do anything about because the priest was getting very angry toward me. He's the one that nearly hit me, raised his hand and was getting ready to come down on me because a young girl had asked me to bring communion to her dad. Her dad had asked. He had had neck surgery. and I was a Eucharistic minister. So, and I took the little girl to Mass, evening masses and things. So anyway, just life. But I need to focus on the spiritual of God and the spiritual of the church. And I want to do better with my vocation and my love of God. I want to learn to love God above all else. That's what this soul ties got me into, and reminded yet again with John of the Cross here, right? my head here hopefully will soak into me even more. But yeah, I want to have an improved spiritual life. And I think I need to stay further away from the temporal, definitely. Not the temporal, beautiful, created world of God, not the temporal, created, inspired works of arts or even film, and not away from what's happening that I need to be praying about. I couldn't sleep last night. I think I fell asleep finally at 5 a.m. Pain. But I an arm and numb pain from nerves, and my knee was throbbing, and so I couldn't sleep. But I hadn't noticed, but I found out about this little girl that was raped and murdered in Texas. This little 12-year-old girl, just recently, I don't know, not long ago. She just had her funeral, I think last Thursday. And so I read about that and listened to some interviews with her heartbroken mother and her grandfather and community people who were heartbroken. And so that's given me a lot to pray about. But as far as other things that will too easily take me into criticizing others, or being involved if God doesn't want me, if God hasn't assigned me to something, to where I'm to act on something eventually, learn about it and act on it, something that's bad is going on. And I don't know yet. I'm praying about this woman who is not being so honest. I'll find out. I did decide that I will find out if she really ever did get a degree in theology, because she has no business calling herself a systematic theologian if she's not. And to be attacking this other person and to attack this bishop, and having herself in national papers with quotes of her authority, and setting precedents about hermits in the church. I do take that a bit seriously, because she has, through her writing, has made people think, Catholics think, that you can only be a diocese hermit. No, there's nothing in the canon law about that. In fact, it says, if you want to be a diocese hermit, this is what it is. And in addition to being privately professed, the private profession has been the centuries-old way. In fact, way back to 2.37 million years ago, they now have proof, archaeological proof of hermits. Not Christian, because Christian has only been, not only, but 2,000 years. But anyway, so I'm praying about that, because I don't want the hermit vocation twisted by someone who isn't who she even says she is. So we'll see what happens with that, but I don't want to get cold off from the spiritual life and from union with God. That's the thing that I realize. Thanks be to God for this lady and what she puts on her blog. And a friend, longtime friend, who herself is all excited about soul ties and this new trend. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's good to get things cleared out. I'm coming finally back around to examination of conscience. And part of that is going into ourselves, knowing ourselves. So we know, do we have an attachment to something? Inordinate attachment. Inordinate, meaning over the top, too much. God doesn't say you can't love the world, you can't love flowers, you can't love your craft or your art or your talents that God gives you to use. No, as long as we love God above everything. And so just today I have been sort of practicing more of an awareness as I've been laid out here with pain. Am I loving God more than all these other things in my life, including memories? I found a longtime friend had written an email. She writes maybe once every 2 to 3 weeks, just a little short thing of her active life. She's not religious, not Christian, but she's a friend. And I don't mind having friends who aren't, because she knows I am a hermit. She knows I love God. He's known me for years and years and years. So my lifestyle. If you have someone really close, it's practically uncharitable if you don't let them know that you've had a vocational change. If you are, and that's why you're more living a life as a hermit. So she knows this is my life. And she's fine with it. She doesn't, and she just shares things. She's doing an act of charity in her mind, and it is lovely to remain my friend and to write little short synopses of her activities. She lives way, way, probably 3,000 miles away. And yes, so she will write, that she did this activity or that activity, or took a group hiking, organized it, or will send a little something that she wrote for the hiker's newsletter. Just fills me in on her life, which I appreciate. I don't want to get stuck in on myself. And part of loving God is that commandment is loving others. And I love this woman in a loving way of friendship. So but it's not been easy today to keep my focus just as practice material on what's going through my mind, what I did, and was it something that was more an attachment than not. So I got involved in writing back to her. And because my pain was up and I was typing away, my mind got off onto a memory. Because I was explaining to her that I have this wonderful understanding of my adult children and of the research that is prevalent now that explains that children who are reared by a chronically ill or chronic pain single parent, especially a mother figure, it causes them damage, different types of damage when they're adults even, because it's sensitive. They are traumatized by all the suffering their mother went through, or their only parent who cared for them or reared them. And then they had all that responsibility. So then from that, though, I went way back into stuff, traumatic stuff of things when my children would go visit, or even after he had this woman that he was living with. He eventually married her, and she had children, and what my ex-husband had done to them, and my children were visiting and were scared to death as to what he was doing to one of his girlfriend's children, beating and kicking, and the child screaming for help. And the mother was just standing outside the bedroom door. My kids and her other two were locked in a bedroom. They locked themselves in. And I told them, stay locked in. But my oldest daughter called me, what do we do? What do we do? Then I told her what to do. You call the police, and then you have the oldest boy, the brother, this little boy who was being beaten and kicked, call his father and report, and then get the police there. And you tell the truth to the police, even if your dad threatens and scares you. But he got out of it anyway because he was a principal. And my daughter called later and said her dad she said, did as usual. Talked about how great he was and principal and all this, and he wasn't being unreasonably, just minor discipline. No, it wasn't. Anyway, just stuff like that. I went off onto that like a broken letter in my writing tour. Then at least though I stopped and I deleted it. I deleted it because I've got to stop this. I have to stop these attachments to these horrific memories that have created trauma in me. But it gets in the way of loving God above all things. And then I remember to say a prayer for my former husband and forgive him and forgive his wife, the woman at the time, and he ended up marrying her. But I forgave her for not doing something to protect her child. That was one of the cutting points for me. I had decided if he was going to cheat on me all the time, I would put up with it and to keep the family together. But if he ever hurt the children, that would be it for me. And he did then. Not kicking, and not even kicking and beating. I didn't like it. He overshook the oldest daughter and thumped her real hard. Like that. And so I just don't, I wouldn't do that. But here I end up being the one that damaged my children, traumatized through my suffering, through the pain, my unmedicated pain. And so I've been writing them letters, text. Gotten 2 done, and I will do the 3rd. I will have to write a mail letter to that one because he doesn't have contact anymore. But I apologized and acknowledged how hard it was for them and how sorry I was, and mentioned that I never, ever, their mother never, ever intended to have them hurting or to be upset and to have their childhoods like that. So it takes a lot, doesn't it? The spiritual life really does. It takes attention, and it takes the scriptures. I read the scriptures every morning, and then I have to reread because if my headache's bad or my pain's bad, I don't remember too much. Can't keep it in mind. But that greatest commandment, thanks be to God, it's simple what Jesus said. Love God above all things and love others as you love yourselves, which when we went through Catherine of Genoa, and how God explains love, and He is pure love, I realized it's loving God in the way that Saint Bernard of Clairvaux understood from God, how He is love, the love of God. And that is that we learn to love as God loves, in the supernal way that God loves, that we love others and as God loves and as God loves us. That's the love, and I'm understanding the love to suffer. I think I've mentioned it, unless it was in one of the videos I canceled because it was so bad, or it seemed to just ramble, which this one is sort of too. But love to suffer, suffer to love. Love to suffer, I was getting hung up on it because I don't love suffering. I don't love the feeling the pain. I don't love the headache. I don't love that little girl who got raped for 2 hours and then strangled to death and her half-naked body put in a bayou down there in Texas, in Houston. I don't love suffering. She suffered, 12 years old, suffered horribly. And so many, there's how many in the nation just today, probably, of children being abused and many killed. So it isn't that. It's not the suffering we love. It's love so much to suffer that you're able to suffer. That's what I think God means, St. Michael meant by it. That we have enough love in us, that we have the love of God in us, or we aspire to that kind of love, that amount of love, that we will suffer and love to suffer, in effect, that we will agree to suffer, that we will suffer in order to love, that we will suffer something so much, like my pain, until natural death. That's one of my biggest challenges, I'll be honest. It's that the pain gets to the point now with 40 years, at the end of August, 40 years on August 22nd will be constant pain. And it's just gotten worse and worse, stronger pain, more body areas. And that is probably my worst temptation, is when the pain gets bad, is to want my life to be over. And it becomes a battle sometimes to want to keep going or to think I can. And it's not that I have suicidal ideations. No, not at all. It's just I need to get even more so, that I have so much love in me that I'm willing and wanting to offer suffering to God by loving so much what He wants and the object of the suffering. And I think I came to this because of my children, how much I love them. And then I thought about Jesus, how much He loves us. And He loved us so much that He was willing to suffer to love. And love to suffer, love in order to suffer. And then you have so much love that you will suffer in order to love even more, to love as God loves, because that's how God loved, by allowing Himself to suffer to the supreme degree of suffering, of being crucified, of suffering unto death, suffering unto blood. St. Paul, at one point, he writes, I haven't suffered yet unto blood. That was what he held out there. That, when he had suffered terribly, but he would say, I haven't suffered yet under unto blood yet. So I'm going to, it all comes back to love. And that includes what I'm to be doing. And to make sure that whatever I share online has love in it and leads to love and glorifies God with love and includes suffering. I really love the hermit vocation. And I think it's fine they have two options. But the one needs to go back to the drawing board, the canon law does. Because it's too many loopholes left open, too many gaps left open. And I think I'll leave it at that. I'll go over that in a separate video. If I would cut my videos into shorter topics, sections, and not get off into all these other. And that's partly, I think, pain also, is that my mind is not even really in my body too much right now. It's in the thoughts. And when one thought touches upon another, it's like a tapestry. And my loom is going back and forth, the woof and the warp. And it's building this tapestry of this video. And it's bringing in new threads. So the tapestry is getting larger and larger and larger with other designs in it that were intended from the beginning. So pray for me that I listen to God. Even listening is not as easy. He has to more speak to me. And that's not because I'm way high up there or anything spiritually. It's because I'm not getting it as I used to more with the nuances. You're supposed to progress so that God doesn't have to put so much temporal effort in to reach us at a temporal level. Well, at least it's within. It's my inner hearing that I'll hear with. He hasn't had to have a voice boom out in the room or print it out in the night like he used to do, used to have to be much more obvious. So, and so don't feel like you're not progressing if you're not having phenomenon happen. Obvious things happen. No, that means that you are able to grasp what God is wanting you to do. Through reading the scripture, he'll speak to you. And you'll grasp that way. But if you have a lot of body pain running interference all the time, to the point that your mind has developed this sort of autonomic response of leaving, then it makes it more difficult to pay attention, to absorb the nuances of Scripture. But trust in God, because God can handle it. God will still work through all these other means with you. He still works through me with Scripture or reading something or putting a thought in my mind that's way out there. I'll still get the thought. So, God bless you all, and let's keep working on loving God above all else. And if we're back to what I was harping on last fall, even, of the love of God. Went over all that St. Bernard of Clairvaux learned about love and the levels of love. The highest love is loving God in himself. Loving God because he's God. And all aspects of his being God. Even the ones that we cannot verbalize because it's too out there, too awesome, too inexplicable to define. And the spiritual life will get like that. But I don't want to be criticizing others. And I regret that. I do that a lot. I know it. I catch myself But it's after I've put the video out, and I don't know how to edit out either. I don't know how to do enough with the computer. Sometimes, they say you shouldn't be doing something if you don't understand the tools you're working with. You wouldn't want to have somebody using a table saw if they hadn't been taught how to use it and don't know how to use it. So you cut your fingers off. Well, even experienced people can do that. You get forgetful, but no. So in a way, I'm on borrowed grace doing these videos, trying to get them to load up and everything. My laptop's doing something else now, still saying all the storage is used up when it's been emptied out. So I'll have to call Apple Care again. But we'll keep working on this love, because that's loving God above all else is how we will get rid of attachments. That's how I will stop myself from these flashbacks or going right into writing about some memory that is traumatic, and isn't helping anyone else, and it doesn't help me to go over it. Some viewer a long time ago reminded me that's a truth. If you keep going over things that were traumatic, you're just like rubbing the salt back in the wound all over, or practically doing it to yourself all over again, reliving the horror, the upset. So that's not living in the order of the present moment either. Memories are okay, but they're not really, they're good in what they teach us of how we learn and progress. But they're not good to go back into much, because they're not in the present moment. We're to be living in this present moment. And so that's one attachment. But I'm also want to do that big diagram and go through the levels that we have, that John of the Cross talks about. That has been the most useful diagram that Dr. Wilhelmsen made or put up of John of the Cross's diagrams, that of the past 20 years this week I went over there. So yes, you'll find that very helpful. At least it has been in my life, to understand my being and what all's involved, and at what level it goes in a certain order, even to the center, which is our soul, which is our will and intellect. And all these other rings, he does it like a circle diagram, rings or levels, can be a level too, but rings is more infinite, more encompassing our being, because there's not an end to it, to our beings. We're eternal beings. But that way we can sort of address more our attachments by knowing, it's an attachment of the outer senses, or no, it's an attachment of the interior senses, or the active senses, or the passive, or no, this is an attachment to a memory. It could be a good memory or a bad memory. But to have an attachment, an over-attachment, we should develop a vocabulary. We can have an appreciation for gardening, or for one of our viewers is an incredible woodworker. That's his prayer to God, his offering. And he specifies his woodworking is utilizing various relics and religious items that have been left to disuse. And he revitalizes them and or incorporates them into a work of art, utilizable. I call that, I can't think of the word now, but it has to do with being a utilizable work of art. I'll think of it sometime. my head injury here. So, so into items or objects that will be reused for holy reference, or even in churches or in a religious community. Objects like a triptych. He revitalized an old disused triptych. That's a 3-panel work of art that gives scenes or aspects of the life of Christ or the Annunciation or different things. And, excuse me, and then he will add other artwork. If the art on it has been destroyed, he'll take other art that isn't being utilized, but it's old and just in disuse, and puts those in and repairs. And he does a lot of woodworking. Beautiful, beautiful. He is an arts craftsman, a fine artist of wood, like Saint Joseph and Jesus. So, and that is his prayer offering, his prayer, his love of God that he gives, that is functional art. That's what I call it, functional art. And this would be what he does is functional, fine religious art, or even artifacts, functional artifacts. Okay, so that's sort of a focus. And then as far as my hermit life, I thought today, other than keeping myself out of the temporal church and the problems with it, because I found a saint for today is this Saint Antonio Rimnisi or something like that. I'll talk about him. I have something to share about him, but he reminds me of myself. And he got into trouble. He got turned on by the church, by some in the church, because he wrote a book of his concerns at the time. This was in the early 1800s, early 19th century, that it was in Italy, but of all of Europe, a lot of the things of the temporal church that was too temporal and not good. And boy, the bishops didn't like it, and he found himself under scrutiny and sanctioned for a while, and it's not good for him. And he finally got his name cleared a year before he died. He died fairly early, 58 years old. I think he was probably very stressed out because he was very devout and very well-intentioned priest, and did a lot of good, a lot of writing, started a religious community and all, and they sanctioned all his writings, said, put them on the list to be not read and destroyed, but they were saved in the end. But I think that one book did it, that one book that he wrote that exposed, but it didn't just expose. It's sort of what I do. I will say something and expose something that isn't really right or best, not for the best. But then I also want to lead into what you can do or what he could do or have that would be best. And that's what he did. He then laid out the plan of the temporal church in its ideal, how it could be. And that should always be our goal, is to have the ideal. And that's what we're doing with ourselves, with loving God above all else. That's the ideal. And with our examinations of conscience at night or whenever, throughout the day or something, if we can catch ourselves as we do something wrong, correct it, ask forgiveness, and move on. And then we've broken our attachment to it right then and there. Forgiveness is a big way to break attachment, to forgive others and to forgive ourselves. So, it's a gorgeous evening here. It's been hot. That's why I have these pigtails in to get because otherwise my hair isn't long enough. When I had just a ponytail, it would keep hanging out, getting in my way. So anyway, I do whatever works. That's how I live. So at this point, definitely. Talk to you later.